Hi class, today's lesson is lesson 5-5. Let's go ahead and write down the purpose. Purpose for this lesson is to solve equations algebraically by adding and subtracting fractions. There's no vocabulary today, nor is there an illustration. We're just going to go straight into the first example, and you should recognize these problems because we solved many such equations, but without fractions or mixed numbers. So today we're going to just add the element of fractions and mixed numbers. Everything else remains the same. When we look at this equation, it's x plus 6 to the third, 6 and 2/3 equals 11. Now, what we want to do is, in all cases, we want to isolate the variable. In order to isolate the variable, we're going to look at the inverse operation of plus 6 and 2/3. So we're going to subtract 6 and 2/3 from both sides. 6 and 2/3 drops out over here, leaving us the x equals. But here we come across a situation where we have 11 subtract 6 and 2/3, and we've got to do some regrouping. So I'm going to call 11 as 10 and 3/3, thereby getting a fraction large enough to subtract 2/3 from. 2/3 from 3/3 is 1/3. 10 subtract 6 is 4. Our answer, x equals 4 and 1/3. Example 2 is a similar problem. Here we need to isolate the variable m. In order to isolate the variable m, we need to subtract 7/10 from both sides. As we look at this, we're looking at 3/5 and 7/10. We need to find a common denominator. I'm going to go ahead and use tenths. So I'm going to multiply both top and bottom by 2. And what I have anew is 5 and 6/10 subtract 7/10. This, of course, drops out. My equal signs pop down to here. Can't subtract 7/10 from 6/10, so I'm going to have to do some borrowing. I'm going to change the 5 to a 4 and 10/10. So in combination, that makes it a 4 and 16/10. Subtract 7/10. When I do that, my answer is more easily seen. 16/10 subtract 7/10 is 9/10. 4 subtract nothing is 4. So 4 9/10 equals m. Next. Third example is one where the inverse is actually addition. In order to isolate the variable, we have to add 1/2. That gets rid of that 1/2 on that side and gives us a W on one side. Now, of course, we have to add 1/2 to this side. In order to do that, I'm going to change this to fourths because I see I need a common denominator. This is already in fourths, so I'm going to make this 2/4. My answer, 2 3/4 plus 2/4. 3/4 plus 2/4 is 5/4. 2 5/4, but that's an improper fraction, so I need to go ahead and change it. I know 4/4 is already 1 whole. So 5 divided by 4 is 1 and 1/4. Plus 2 is 3 and 1/4. So there's my answer. Remember, it's got to be simplified as well. Last example is actually a word problem involving subtraction and addition. It says, on average, a person in Costa Rica consumes 132.25 pounds of sugar per year. If the average person in Costa Rica consumes 24.25 pounds less than the average U.S. person, what's the average sugar consumption per year by person in the U.S.? So I'm going to write down what they want. They want the average of the U.S. That's what they want. Okay, what they've given to us is the average in Costa Rica. Which is 132. Now, don't worry about the label until the very end. Then it says, if the average person in Costa Rica consumes 24 pounds less than the average person in the U.S. So what happens is, actually, an average person in the U.S. consumes more sugar. So I'm going to make this average U.S. person U, the variable U. So I know the average person in the U.S., U, if we subtracted 24 and a quarter pounds, or 24 and a quarter pounds of sugar, would equal 132 and a quarter. Oh, I forgot the quarter over here. So I'll put that down over there. Now, I have come up with my equation just to make sure I have it. Here's the U.S. average per person. If I subtract 24 and a half, I would get the Costa Rican average because I know the U.S. average is higher. So now I'm going to go ahead and do what I do, which is isolate the variable. I'm going to go ahead and add 24 and a half to both sides. Here, when I add 24, the zero it becomes a 0, and all I have is the isolated variable, which is u, which is what I want. And then I'm going to go ahead and add these two, but of course I need to find a common denominator. I'm going to change the 1/2 into 2/4. So now I have 1/4 plus 2/4 is 3/4. And 132 plus 24, 2 plus 4 is 6, 3 plus 2 is 5. Bring the 1 down. So in the U.S., it's 156 3/4 pounds per person. That's a lot of sugar. All right, now here's to complete the problem. This is your job. Here is an extension table for a table increase its length by 2 1/4 feet. So here we'll take this green line. That's the original length. It increased by 2 1/4 feet, or I should say 2 1/2 feet, to a total now, which is the blue line, to a total of, what is that distance? 8 3/4 feet. Question is, what was the original length? All right, we'll see you in class.